have you on audio. I'm dialing into the WebEx number that's provided. Actually, the screen, I don't know, Gordon, if you're sharing slides that'll be coming through WebEx or not, but I do not have access.
It's just an interview. It's,
okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we're not going to share a screen.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep, good.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
You have the floor. It's recording. We're good.
Good. And is there anybody on the WebEx that I missed?
No.
No. Okay, good. Well, welcome everyone. This is the ISSIP Innovation Roundtable Lunch. It's a small gathering every month where we get together and discuss topics of mutual interest to the ISSIP community, International Society of Service Innovation Professionals. I'm delighted today to have Gordon Feller from Cisco here. You're all going to get a chance to ask Gordon some questions, but I'll get started with a few to get started. But let me just start by saying what a pleasure it is to interview Gordon Feller. Gordon is one of those people who I admire tremendously because you, in my mind, represent a great example of what we look for in a T-shaped service innovation professional. Gordon not only gets technology, he works at Cisco, he's the director there, great insights if you go out to the web of technology trends, but Gordon also gets business, again, from knows that sustainability of these innovations require business models, but also public policy. And this is what, yeah, I see the technology in business quite a bit, but I don't see the technology, business, and public policy. That's rare. So you've got that, work with the World Bank, the Urban Age Institute. You understand nonprofit research organizations like ISSIP well. And I just, so anyways, it's a delight to have this opportunity to interview you. Thanks. Yeah, and Gordon heads up not only Cisco's efforts around smarter cities, but also efforts around Internet of Things. So there's a broad set of topics we'll ask you some questions about. I did want to mention, though, that you co-founded the convener of Meeting of the Minds and also the annual Leadership Summit of the Urban Age Institute. I want people to know about that. The list of people that you've consulted with over the years is really impressive, so I just want to read that. It includes the World Bank, the United Nations, German and Canadian national governments, we should have the Finnish government too, the Rockefeller Foundation, IBM, Reuters, Metropolis, United Cities, and local governments. So anyway, great capabilities. Gordon advises leaders around the world, so he's a great ambassador for the U.S. as well, on advanced technologies and how to apply advanced technologies. Also, I find it very, very interesting, and I meant to add this, in addition to public policy, you've actually led the creation, I guess, of Urban Age Institute magazine. So from, when we think about arts and humanities and communications, Gordon has a lot of expertise and experience and skill around that. And I just want to read this other list, which I find very impressive. He's published hundreds of articles in newspapers, scholarly journals, magazines, including CFO Magazine, Urban Land Magazine, Time Magazine, Financial Times, and I've already mentioned he's the executive editor of Urban Age Magazine and Planet Earth Magazine. Frequent keynote speaker, Columbia University awarded him a bachelor's in political science, cum laude, master's in international affairs from Columbia, served as a Lehman Fellow, a Wallace Fellow, and a Dean Fellow. So, wow.
Gordon's bringing back old memories.
Gordon's a busy guy, and we thank you so much for making time. So for the next hour, 90 minutes, we'll have a chance to ask Gordon some questions. And the other thing I should mention is Gordon's going to send us a presentation. So for those who'd like to have a PowerPoint to digest some of the details, we'll have that. I'll actually post that slide share so it's easily accessible. We'll tweet about it. and put it into the ISSIP social media stream. So thank you, Gordon, for making that available to us. But we want to keep this, interview discussion informal, so that we have a chance to discuss some issues. If you go on the web, though, there's several interviews I found of you, and some of the questions that I had, I found people had already asked you, so I took those off my list because I wanted to ask unique questions, not the what is a smarter city, right? So we're not going to do any of those ones that you've asked many times, but I did want to start with my first question is really from an ISSIP perspective. We are trying to encourage this next generation student like Francesca. Trying to make sure the Francescos of the world, and Francesco, in some ways you're very unique, but in other ways I've discovered there's just a huge number of students today who really want to make a contribution to their city. You know, Francesco is passionate about how can I improve the transportation in Rome. I mean, that's something I know he's passionate about. And he reads and he thinks about it, but I also sense a little bit of frustration of like, okay, I'm just a student. How do I actually, how do ISSIP members who are students, how can they actually get involved in creating a smarter city? And also, many of them might look at your career and say, oh, I want to be like Gordon. How did your career unfold? So could you just maybe go into your bio a little bit about how did you get interested in this area? What advice do you have for students?
Sure. I won't go into ancient history, but I will say that, at a university environment, there's a lot of connections between the university and the city that's hosting the university. And because the university is a big employer, because it's a visible part of the city brand around the world, I'm always encouraging university students to connect with the city government, particularly with the economic development arm of the city government in New York City, where I went to university. They actually have a very well-developed enterprise called the New York City Economic Development Corporation. And most cities now around the world that are worth their salt have that. And they're looking to do both the incoming investment, but also growing local enterprises and helping them to go global. So there's traffic going both north and south, so to speak. And one of the things I am actively encouraging university students to do from the very first day they arrive is to let the school know that they want to be involved in projects that engage the city, whether it's around the planning of the university campus expansion, because most universities are always in the business of expanding their footprint, which creates tension with the city and with the neighborhood. And there's always a lot of effort to try and make peace between the university and the surrounding community. This was especially relevant in the big cities. So Columbia has had a very frictionful, if that's a word, relationship with the surrounding community because they're rich and they tend to ignore the needs of mostly poor people who live in and around the university. NYU has had a different problem. Fordham has a different problem. Other campuses in Manhattan have had different problems. But because there's always a university relationship, positive, negative, usually mixed, between the city and the university, I encourage the students to figure out what's been created institutionally and then what should be done that maybe isn't being done and propose it because, that relationship is so complicated and fraught that one of the things that university executives will do is they'll say, we'd love to have more students involved in this because it's right now only faculty and administration. These people are actually paid to do this, so their passion level is a little bit low. Let's get passionate people who are essentially volunteering because they care about this engaged because that will maybe generate a lot more energy and creativity for the effort. Because frankly, the effort between the university and the city is generally more money. It's kind of like, we have to go through the motions of having these conversations with each other, but, we're basically conflictual. So whether it's innovations in the campus, on the campus, around microgrids, around new styles of mobility, around smarter, cleaner buildings, whatever it is, the city is probably not too aware of what's going on. And so I've said to students, go to the university president's office or the dean's office or the chancellor's office or the provost's office, but also go to the city government and don't wait for permission. Say, I'm here. To some extent, I'm representing the student population because I'm here. I may not have been elected to do this, but I'm actually sitting right in front of you now, Mr. Mayor or Mrs. Deputy Mayor or whoever it is, and let's engage in figuring out what the students can bring to the table. So
that's great advice.
That's just what I did. I've encouraged people to do it, and it turned out well for me. I was able to engage with the city government, with the president's office of the university, with the dean's office of the school that I was in, the UN, which is where I first really started working seriously with the UN. It was that first year in college. Not every city in the world has the United Nations, but there are a lot of international agencies around the world. But people in Montreal might not know it, but the International Civil Aviation Organization is there, and the Montreal Convention was signed there, and lots of other things are happening in lots of cities. So there's a lot of international institutions who have their headquarters in cities. And if the university turns out not to be interested in engaging, there's all those other options there to engage into and connect with the university while you have the identity as a university student. Take advantage of it. And it's partly for career development, but it's also because it's a way of showing and engaging with the city. Because, look, if students don't care about the city, a lot of the older people are already preoccupied and stressed out with their job life.
Yeah. I think that's great advice, Gordon, and it gives special meaning to, I think, what I'm going to say. So Berkeley actually has a student from Berkeley who's on the
Board of Regents.
The council. I think they are elected.
Yeah.
And so,
and the City Council of Berkeley has a program because it's the largest employer in Berkeley.
Yeah.
And it's, essentially the global brand of the city of Berkeley is the university. The City Council makes a special effort to bring students in for project development.
And I think ISSIP could play a role supporting students who want to get involved with their city. We can provide ISSIP support for them and maybe find those students who are doing that, make them ISSIP ambassadors or something to mentor the next generation.
Well, the big secret that people forget when they're on a university campus is it's a small city.
Yeah.
And that happens to have a dictator.
Yeah.
Unlike the rest of the city, which is in most countries, fortunately, democratic, even non-democratic societies go through the motion of having elections at the local level.
Yeah.
They don't do it at the national level sometimes, but at the local level they'll do it. Because it's a city within the city, if you wanted to do a technology deployment around innovative smart city services, the chancellor or the provost or the dean or the university president actually has the power to say, yeah, we own those lampposts. Yeah, we own those parking spaces. Yeah, we own those buildings. And let's use them as a living laboratory to plug new technology innovations into the life of the city and let the engineering students, whether mechanical or electrical engineering, and the anthropology and social science students engage in figuring out how human beings interact with these new technologies. I wish I was back on the university campus, but I'm too old.
Well, I'll tell you something. I'd love to find a way for ISSIP to partner with the Urban Age Institute, maybe some of these meetups around student participation.
Well, and let me take a moment just to explain about Urban Age. So when Bill Clinton took office and was elected in November of '92, this is now ancient history, some of you are way too young, one of his first actions was to appoint a new president of the World Bank. The U.S. gets to appoint the president of the World Bank. The French get to appoint the president of the IMF. That's why Christine Lagarde is president of the IMF, and so on. There's a little system for allocating nationalities in the UN agencies. So Jim Wolfenson took office, and one of his first actions was to make a speech, which I was involved in writing, that basically said, we live in an urban age, the World Bank has to be urban-oriented. Because he came in like a banker, and he said, I'd like to see the loan portfolio. And when he looked at the loan portfolio, it was like, he realized, your urbanization was moving like a speeding bullet, and it was taking over planet Earth. He saw this really before the big urbanization wave hit. but it was coming fast enough that he could recognize it. So he set up a unit in the bank that published Urban Age magazine, that organized programs, that did the first corporate partnerships the World Bank ever did. Because in the 800-pound regulations in the World Bank, you're not supposed to partner with corporates because they could be bidding on work. So we had to go through the whole process of essentially rewriting that so you could partner with Siemens and W.S. Atkins and a whole bunch of other organizations. AECOM was one of the partners. So when Wolfenson finished his term, and Bill Clinton finished his term, and the next president of the World Bank was coming in, rather than leaving it to the wolves, he said, let's spin this thing out as an independent nonprofit, focused on city services. So of all the things that we had, you'll be pleased to know, the services agenda was the most important. But his interest, Wolfenson's interest, was services on top of what? And at that point in 2001, the digital services agenda was just starting to take shape. So it spun off as an independent nonprofit. It's now headquartered in San Francisco. I became CEO when it spun out. And then I joined Cisco in 2010, first as a consultant and then full-time, 2010, joined as a full-timer, and stayed on the board of the nonprofit, which organizes the Meeting of the Minds annual program, which is next week. So 450 invited guests from 25 countries who are gathering to talk about the future of city services, transportation services, energy services, water services, building systems and services, but the underlying digital platform that enables the innovations to be plugged into the city. And so that's the night of the 20th through the night of the 22nd. It's all webcast live. So people can log into cityminded.org and they can see the webcast. And then it's captured for video on demand afterwards.
Thanks. So keeping with the student theme, my next question is really about the complexity of cities. And as the world gets more complex, as cities get more complex, even these digital platforms, I think, that are intended to simplify things, make us more aware of the abundance of data around cities that isn't actually fully utilized. Do you think there's a new kind of education system needed down at the K-12 level to prepare students for this really complex urban world they're going into? It's different from the farm I grew up on in Maine, right? Rural life, farm life, that was a few generations ago. Now kids are born into these really, really complex urban systems.
My worry about I'm a new grandfather and I have a 6-month-old that comes over to get babysitting services because I'm a service provider now, which is a good thing in this case. And I know that in 2 years, because the way he looks at the phone and the computer, and when they happen to be playing the same music, he's very aware, of the digital world already at 5 or 6 months. So I'm a little worried that, the digital domain overtakes the human interaction domain at the youngest age. So, our daughter went to a Waldorf school because they basically said, we're not going to immerse kids in the digital world. And, the funny thing is, when I interviewed a bunch of CEOs in the Valley about, their interest in kind of basic education, it turned out a lot of the tech CEOs send their kids to Waldorf schools.
Yeah.
And the reason they do is they're worried that the digital immersion too early can cut off a lot of other skills. And then they wind up looking and acting like you and I, which is not good. We don't want that. So we want kids to grow up being semi-normal.
Yeah.
So I think, I think there's a time that's appropriate after immersion in the world and nature and human beings. The digital comes at the right time. It's not always, although it looks like the way we behave, of course, we're always on and we're always connected and we're always digital. I think for the youngest and their vulnerability and their wide-eyed experience of the world, however, in the interacting with the digital systems of the world, particularly in a very dense place like a city, I think we're going to have to, it's kind of like sex education. It was for a long time neglected until, STDs and other things made it absolutely necessary to educate 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds about their bodies, which was a lot of cultural resistance to that, especially in the southern part of the U.S. And, you know, Europeans were way ahead of us. I think this is something similar. We're going to have to basically own up to the fact that the complexity of the city and the incredible variety of opportunities in the city is going to force some kind of briefing program and entry, you know, re-entry program into the city when you've had the right other opportunities to get basic skills. And parents will maybe find a time when they think their child is ready for it. I can't see it's going to be mandatory, but I think cities are going to engage younger people faster, partly because they're the engine for the creative solutions that the cities are looking for. The complexity of the city probably is going to be simplified by somebody who's like our grandson, you know, 6 months old, and he's already, you know, building solutions in his basement, I suspect.
So I don't know if you've seen it, but there's this great quote from Albert Einstein, I fear the day that technology surpasses human interaction. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
I'll send it to you. It's exactly what you were talking about, and I'll send it to this group as well. But moving on to the next question, and it's a bit unfair. I'll admit this is a bit unfair, but let me ask it anyway.
Uh-oh.
What do you think? What or which do you consider to be the smartest city in the world? And are there other cities that are getting smart faster, but maybe started further behind? When you look at the cities in the world and how they're evolving to become smarter, what kind of narrative emerges? And what kind of story do you tell about this? And what is the smartest city on the planet?
Well, Bill Clinton said it very well during his impeachment trial. It depends what is. So I mean, for us, you know, in the services business, for us, I think it's much less about the bright, shiny objects that make the city look and act cool, and it's much more about service delivery. So who's delivering the smartest services? You know, there are probably a couple that I would point to. So Barcelona certainly made some very serious investments in, for instance, delivering a different kind of municipal waste service by connecting these dumb objects called trash cans.
Yeah. And
enabling the municipal waste handling company to know when a particular trash can was basically pinging the network to say, I'm ready and I'm needing some help here. Mm-hmm. And my trash bin is full. So I think in terms of inventing new approaches to digital services, Barcelona's done a really very good job. Singapore, on the strictly e-government services platform, has done really well. So in their case, you know, register your baby, register your business, register your home remodeling, register your car, register your divorce, register your bankruptcy, register your schooling program, register your vacation if you're a government employee. I mean, all of it is totally digital. It's totally mobile enabled, and it really is seamless. And it's all built on a common back end so that, you know, the system will know if you're registering a business and you registered your child and it's not the same address, you're not working from home. You know, so it's that kind of smart understanding of who you are to be able to mash up a lot of different data about you. Now, that's scary for the kinds of activists that Steve is worried about because it feels a lot like Big Brother. That the city/state of Singapore knows that I've registered a business and I've registered a baby and it's not in the same place. They're going to say, well, why didn't he register his workplace? You know, so there is that part of a very efficient service delivery using digital platforms, which knows a lot about me. But the truth is, if I go onto Axiom, the website, which is, I think, Who Am I or something like that, it's the marketing company that has all the information. It knows Leon's age, it knows he's married, it knows he lives in the valley, it knows his wife works for a startup, it knows he drives a certain car, it knows he went to a certain school, you know, all of the things that marketing organizations know. Yeah, and they built a site which is their attempt to try to say, well, we're so responsible that if you type in your name and you can verify who you are, we will tell you everything we know about you. I'm not sure that's actually a very good idea, but they thought that that was a nice way to generate some positive energy. But you're very interested to see how accurate, because they use, lots of streams of data, like what kind of mail do you respond to, and what kinds of magazines do you subscribe to, and what kind of phone service is your name associated with, and are you a Netflix subscriber because they buy that list, and so forth and so on. And there's a picture of you, which may be, by the way, in your case, a 29-year-old female blonde, because they sometimes don't get it right. They don't get it right.
Yeah, not just for.
She was from Maine too, by the way.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something that scares people, and we have to figure out how to soften that edge a little bit. So, if I was looking at transportation services, I would probably look at a city in the megacity category like London, who have figured out how to integrate a lot of services. And Francesco, I'd love your insight when we get into the discussion about which city is really experimenting very well. San Francisco is the host of a lot of innovative transportation companies, but the city services are quite weak. So they have this imbalance. They're the host of amazing innovations and innovative companies from Lyft and Uber to, Sidecar and Get Along and Get Around and Shuttle and Chariot and a dozen interesting companies a week seem to pick San Francisco as their birthplace, but some of their services are not really available in San Francisco the way that San Francisco city government might want, because they have a very entrenched transportation agency bureaucracy, which is MUNI, BART, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, the Taxi and Limousine Commission, the mayor's office, which has its own transportation powers, separate from all of the above, and then all the independent operators. So, once the Transbay Terminal is built and then the high-speed rail is coming in, that'll add another layer underground that will add, fragmentation. So this is a challenge for smart cities who are trying to reinvent one segment like transport, is that they're suffering from the effect of multiple choice fragmentation that's not integrated on a common digital platform, which is where, one of the conversations that we'll have in this slide deck that I'm sending you is really addressing this, is city infrastructure as a service. And the team that Leon and I are with, we're really focused on what is it going to take for a city to stop adding to the fragmentation problem and build a common data layer, which is a common city digital platform, into which innovations can be plugged in as they come and go. Because there will be fads, there will be companies that survive, that shake out, there will be companies that do extremely well, the Ubers of the world, and then companies that we thought were going to do really well but disappear overnight.
Okay. So you mentioned Singapore, and I think Singapore does amazingly well in water recycling too.
And during Meeting of the Minds, the guy who was the founder of New Water, which is their enterprise delivering New Water, is going to share the story of how that happened on stage.
Oh,
George Madaman.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Are there other cities that are really good in water?
Water.
I was going to say, I just looked up the meeting on Richmond, October 20th to 22nd.
Yeah, in Richmond in the East Bay. We didn't want to do it in the Valley because all the good stuff is happening here. We wanted to move it up a little bit into the East Bay.
So other cities that are really good in water?
Well, I mean, Milwaukee has become a kind of global exemplar of different relationship between the customers and the utility, different relationship between the regulator and the utility. They've had a lot of federal funds to help them reinvent the way that they do reduce, reuse, recycle. The 3 Rs are very big there. They're the home of Pabst Blue Ribbon beer.
Right.
And so they decided that, because they have this huge availability of water from the Great Lakes, that they should take advantage of that strength, like Helsinki is the gateway to Europe, Milwaukee is the gateway to good water-based products like beer. And so they decided that they were going to build at the university, at the utility, at the regulator, at the city level, a lot of core competency around reinventing the water system. They haven't really made much stride around what I would call lighting up the dark assets, the pumps, the pipes, the collectors, because they do some rainwater collection in addition to what they draw from the lake. This is something that they're starting.
Aquaponics.
Yeah, they're doing amazing experimentation. Veolia, the French company, has a partnership with the local utility. IBM did something similar in Santa Rosa, you may have heard, where the water utility there has reinvented themselves with IBM technology. So Cisco has not been active with water utilities. We're talking about it, Tony Shakib is talking about it right now. But the reality is that I think we're going to be slow in developing a unique solution around water because our plate is pretty full around smart parking, smart transit and traffic, smart buildings, smart grid, and especially smart outdoor lighting.
Which city is the first one to have driverless cars?
Well, Tokyo, I was in Kyoto with our Vice President Maciek Krantz a couple of days ago for an event that the Prime Minister was part of, and he stood up and said that they were going to be in Tokyo deploying autonomous vehicles around the Olympics, and that when people come to the Olympic program, the city is going to be filled with robotic cars, which will have a unique name. Each car will have a unique identity, I think is what he said. And now they're trying to figure out how to keep the name of the car separate from somebody's actual name because they don't want robots and human beings to do too much commingling.
Yeah. Yesterday at the cognitive event we had in San Francisco, we had a big contingent of folks from IBM Japan and the Pepper robot that SoftBank has was a real bit of that.
Well, one of the reasons that the Japanese have gotten so enthusiastic about robots is that they have a severe labor shortage. They're not importing foreign labor the way we do or most other countries. There is a real desire for homogeneity. And so as a result, when an older person needs a caregiver and the younger person in that family is not ready to be the full-time caregiver, which most young people can't afford to do, to put their life on hold for an elderly parent or grandparent, the question is when will robots step up and help Granny, to and from the bathroom?
Yeah. Well, even Pepper, I think some of them, they have the screen here, and they have a camera so that children can monitor a little bit of what's happening with the elderly adults. And Pepper also has like a infrared control, like a lot of elderly have trouble changing the channel. So, really? So it can help them change the channel and give reports. It's wild. Great. So maybe we've already addressed this, but I know you're active in the Meeting of the Minds in Urban Age. Can you tell us more about these groups and its meetings and agenda? And is there a way for students to participate? And is there a way for virtual participation? I think you touched on that.
But I'll say three things. Yes, student scholarships. So, Francesco, you're invited. If you can cancel all your appointments on the 21st and 22nd. So there is it's a small nonprofit organization, but they really make an effort. So this year there's a hackathon, which you may decide you want to participate in over the weekend coming up. And so Cisco and AT&T, Qualcomm, especially those three, are working to enable a group of about 125 students who've already registered, and maybe by today it's more, and they're going to constitute about 15 teams. And the idea is they spend all day Saturday, not overnight, because usually these hackathons overnight get a bit crazy. We're not going to give them power drinks. We're actually going to give them real quality food so they can get some sleep and come back the next day and actually have a decent night's sleep. I'm a big believer in at least 6 hours of sleep for younger people, now that I'm a grandfather. So the idea is they're going to focus to build a new solution, whether it's just an algorithm or maybe it's a prototype of an app, or maybe it's a full-scale application, or maybe it's an analytics program, whatever it is, they're going to build it to make it relevant for a city like Richmond. So all sorts of data sets have been made available by the East Bay Municipal Utility District, which runs all the water systems of the East Bay, by Caltrain, by Caltrans, by the city government of Richmond, by the school system, by the hospital systems, to take that data, and instead of having to make fake data relevant for your application, build something, and then Qualcomm is giving $5,000 as a prize after the judges select. So that first morning of the 21st of October will be the announcement of the winners. That's aimed at young people who, like Francesco, are passionate about solving a problem. Parallel to that is an industrial hackathon for large companies. Among them are Black & Veatch, which is a 100-year-old construction and engineering company. Accenture, which is not a small company. I think they have 350,000 employees around the world. A small startup called Similarity, which has built a way of doing real-time data analytics, a very interesting young company that happens by coincidence to be headquartered in Richmond. Another young company which is doing energy management and energy analytics in the cloud called EnergyWorks. So, young people are participating in that, but they're up, young, big and small companies are going at it to try to build something that will win the prize. The prize there is AT&T is writing a $5,000 check, not to the winning company, but to a nonprofit organization, young people focused, student focused, independent nonprofit in Richmond called RISE, R-Y-S-E, which is training young people on how to be coders.
Oh, okay.
So the idea here is, small nonprofit organization trying to figure out how to bring the next generation in. I think they would love to have ISSIP as a partner, and I'll facilitate for you a conversation with their team once they've finished up this event. They're kind of pedal to the metal right now, trying to finish everything. But if any of you want to watch the webcast, it'll actually probably be pretty interesting.
I'll definitely watch part of that.
I just informed my contact at the city, so they can go.
And Mr. Samada, the CIO of the city, who was at the White House event, I think he may be joining us.
Good.
Vijay Samada is the CIO of the city of San Jose. Somebody who actually should talk about that NSF project at some point.
Very good. Very, very good.
He's a very open-minded, very talented guy.
Well, we're at the stage where I want to open it up to folks on the phone, and there is a little bit of noise coming from the WebEx. So if you're there and moving around, you might want to just go on mute. But also get a question for Gordon ready, because we'll let the WebEx people go first.
Sorry, Jim, that was me. My apologies.
You get to for that. You get to ask the first question.
Yeah,
I'm going to. So, Gordon, your comment about Singapore. I lived and worked there for 6 years, and this is going back quite a while ago. My first stint there, the first 5 years. But just when you were talking about a little bit of the Big Brother mentality, and at the edge of this, you sort of need to pull it back. The head of Microsoft in Singapore years ago was interfacing with the Singapore tech guys. And he said, why do you guys need so much storage for your phone systems? And Microsoft was involved in working with one of the big database groups to make sure they had sufficient storage. And he suddenly dawned on him that they were recording the vast majority of all calls coming in and off the island. And he challenged them on it. And, of course, they got this very smirkish look on their faces and wouldn't acknowledge it. But he was pretty certain at the time. So I think, smart cities are awesome, but at the margin, I think sometimes we need to just call a little, blow a whistle slightly and make sure that things aren't getting out of control on privacy issues sometimes.
Well, and, one of the things that, one of the sessions, I think it's on the afternoon of the 22nd, in the later afternoon, Gene Dunn will be on stage, along with a few others, talking about what is it going to require if we have cities of the future that are starting to happen now. We're not waiting for the future to happen. We're creating it now. What kind of workers, city government workers, private sector workers, with what kind of training around IoT skill sets are going to be needed to run those cities? And one of the training is going to be, how do you handle the data? Who owns the data? Who gets access to the data? How is the data anonymized? How is it used as a resource without the going over the line into abuse of the resource? And this is one of those areas I'm hoping they're going to talk about on stage, is figuring out the balance as you're working with data to leverage the value without stepping over.
Good. Great
That's what I
question.
agree.
Jane or Amar or Ralph, do you have a question? Out there in WebEx land, you may be on mute.
This is Jane. Yeah, it's glad to hear that actually Japan is very big on the smart city. Especially the interesting part is using the autonomous cars at the Olympics 2020. Mm-hmm. So I just want to know what kind of program the Japanese government has trying to support this activities from Japan.
Yeah, this is a problem. Abe, when he stood up on this session in Kyoto, basically admitted that innovation was not coming out of the government. And it was a very interesting speech, which I don't know if it was reported, but basically, if I could paraphrase, and I'll probably get in trouble, it's something like the Japanese government to pull off 2020 Olympics, we're going to have to depend on innovation coming from outside the government. And which was a big admission by, you know, one of the 3 or 4 largest economies in the world, elected head of state who's basically going to host the world in his city, in his capital city, is basically saying, you know, we're stuck and we're going to have to figure out how to do this, and we don't have a lot of time. And we have pretty ambitious goals like autonomous vehicles on every street. Mm-hmm. I think they're stuck. I really do. I really think Fujitsu...
Maybe there's a lot of opportunities for, IT vendors and other vendors like you and me and Fujitsu, of course.
We'd love to talk to Fujitsu about this, because one of the things that Leon and I are working...
Yeah, actually, I try to encourage the Olympic 2020 is a great opportunity for Fujitsu.
Yeah, they're going to spend a lot of money. That's where we want to be. Wherever somebody is spending money to solve a problem, this is a good place for us to be.
Okay, good to learn that the government actually depending on vendors to push for that. Thank you.
That's what happened to the U.S. when we hosted the Olympics, all privatized, right? It's completely privatized.
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. So,
and then again in Salt Lake City. Yeah.
Good. Hey, before I open it up to people in the room, Amar or Ralph, would you want to? Oh, they're not on? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Well, then we are going to open it up to the room here, and I've got a few more questions. Nobody has questions, but I wanted to be fair with the rest of you all. Yes.
What do you see are the areas, the one area that is undeveloped, the concept of smart cities? So what is something that
The undeveloped area.
I may point to Leon right after my comments, because he may have some ideas, at least the Cisco perspective on this.
Okay, yes, sure.
The undeveloped, where essentially there's a big hole waiting.
Right.
I would think it's getting beyond the smartphone as the locus of citizen empowerment. So, you know, we tend to think it's all about the apps. Mm-hmm. And in some sense, for the citizen, the app is the interface that's increasingly showing up between me and my city. I use the app to get my transportation. I use the app to pay my water bill. I use the app, you know, to essentially interface with the service provider who's delivering me a service in exchange for my dollars. And it could be the tax dollar and not just the payment per service dollar. Tax essentially is a payment per service. So I think that that's a fairly limited way to engage and interact with the city. And the app is, to some extent, two-dimensional, partly because, you know, there's no human being there. Now, if the new Alexa intelligent assistant that Amazon wants me to fall in love with, if she becomes three-dimensional, I might have a different experience, because I can say to Alexa, you know, I'd really like to get together with my neighbors and talk about this problem that we have of these dogs who are roaming on the street and seem to be without a leash. We know somebody owns them, but we have to figure out a solution to this problem. Alexa, could you connect me with my neighbors and figure out which ones are interested in being part of this? Because I'd love to host a meeting in my house. Organize that for me, Alexa. So if Alexa had that level of artificial intelligence, I could engage with my neighbors, and basically the sort of messy part, which is organizing all that crap, goes away. And then I can really focus on the opportunity to have a conversation with my neighbors and come up with some creative ideas that are not going to require shooting the dogs on site, because there's got to be some solution that doesn't involve shooting dogs. Yeah. So I would love to have artificial intelligence that was, let's call it city smart, that could figure out what neighborhood I live in, who are my neighbors, who's my elected official, what are the services I'm supposed to be receiving, what are the problems crime-related, because there's stats that could be accessed. That could, you know, Alexa could say, Gordon, did you know that the crime rate in this neighborhood is going up? I don't think your neighbors realize this. Do you want to organize a meeting? I'd love to be able to have that kind of artificial intelligence interface, which is much more three-dimensional than simply an app that sits on the real estate called the smartphone. That's a piece of the business that I think people would love. That also happens to be relevant for help me manage my professional life, or help me manage my family relationships, or help me get my car fixed. I mean, we're moving into a world where Amazon thinks that Alexa is going to provide that, and Siri is moving into a world where she thinks she can provide it. She still doesn't know who I am, by the way. I keep telling her my name, and she can't say, I can't pronounce your name.
About me,
Easy for you.
And again, she keeps telling you, Tina, you don't have two I's in your name. She keeps telling you that.
But what you just mentioned about the dog and the community is what I mentioned earlier, the smart community.
Yeah.
Smaller group of
Neighborhood and scale.
that you can serve because they have shared common interests. When you get too big, the interests diverge. I think if you look at from San Jose, East San Jose and the university area are completely different companies. They have different expectations, different things need. So I think that the success might come in when you have a smaller group that has similar problems that they can see, and the citizens are also together doing one.
You're totally right, totally right. And by the way, most smart city projects, because they're so fixated on the bright, shiny object of the latest technology, because, where do we work? Obviously, we're pushing this stuff out the door. The reality is people, where they are, they're less preoccupied about technology solutions and more preoccupied about problems that they think are bigger than they are.
Even potholes, potholes and broken street lights, the community the schools, the sidewalks, and the location of supermarkets, and all these other services are more important to them than, as you said, the shiny object.
Now, of course, the argument we're going to make is there is a shiny object that can help address that, and let's get to that, and it's not just a marketing problem.
I have a question.
Louder for them.
Yes. So how do you see the professional association, all the activities that are going on around the city, university, industry? How do you see a professional association that takes part in promoting this growth, this innovation?
So the big missing link, which is not a technology missing link, that was the last question. This is more on the institutional missing link, is the bridge between the different sectors. So I think an association like this could help bridge between public sector, elected and appointed, and the agencies that those people run, university and academia, corporate, large and small, and government, national government. So, and that's why the NSF might be most interesting, because if ISSIP was the connector, the bridge builder between, to design and help manage a conversation that allowed for the different approaches that we're taking to find common framework, because you are providing a frame around this, which ultimately means we're going to have to talk the same language. The public sector has a stakeholder called the voter and the taxpayer, which is different from the private sector stakeholder who's looking for a financial return on investment. Occasionally, they're looking for non-financial return, positive benefits, but usually it's a financial return. The university has stakeholders, students, alumni, donors, faculty, which is different. So everybody's got a different stakeholder, and so they come to it with a different perspective. I think in the middle of that matrix is the association, which all of them can feel comfortable being in, and take advantage of that to say, okay, you're all representing critical elements of the big story, but none of you have the big story. And you're not proposing the association has the big story, but you're the place where the big story can be defined and can be commonly addressed. And I don't see anybody else who's doing that. I mean, I sit in meetings where public sector and private sector people talk the same words, but it's really different language. And
professional associations, we take that lifetime from student all the way through to end of career. We even have
no matter what the career is.
Right. We even have a retired ISSIP thing. So we go all, already? Doug McDavid.
Oh.
As we retired.
Careful, Steve, we're going to induct you in that.
and what we're fond of saying is it doesn't matter what organization you're part of. It doesn't matter, whether you're a student or a professor or an industry, or you change jobs, you can still be part of this continuity. So you're right, I think professional associations can provide that.
But it's hard to be a bridge, because you've got to have, the way bridges are built. You ever seen the picture of the Golden Gate Bridge as it was being built? It's very hard to actually get to the point in the middle, because you're not suspended in the process.
Well, I think for discovery style, one of the ways is experiment.
We should have a discovery summit in collaboration with Urban Age.
Yeah, I was thinking.
That would be fun. And we have an organization in San Francisco that we're working with that might want to host it, so you get the benefit of being in that part of the bay and the valley simultaneously. So let's plan. And Cisco has a new cool office, Meraki, which we acquired, has the coolest office in the whole Cisco network of offices. So cool, in fact, that our ID cards don't work. They don't want to be invaded by people like us who are looking for a cool place to hang out.
Where is it?
It's in Mission Bay.
Oh.
So they're happy to host. They've been after me to talk about what we're doing on Smart Cities.
That's where I am.
Where you guys
Yeah, we are.
Everybody cool is moving to Mission Bay.
Yeah.
Except when the basketball stadium comes, they're going to be out of there.
Yeah, but the traffic coming
terrible.
in is
It's terrible.
awful. It took me more than an hour.
Did you take Vermont or did you come up 101?
Oh, I have to go through 280 and then 101.
I went through 80 Vermont.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This Bay Area, we always talk about routes.
Yeah.
All right, if I take 101 and I do 280 and I use the 380 interchange, can I get off on Vermont and then go left into Mission Bay? It's like in New York, the taxi driver says, you want to take the West Side Highway? You want to go the FDR Drive? You want to take the tunnel? I say, you're the boss, you do it.
Yeah, very good. Other comments, questions?
I like the idea of re-event. I think it's the layer. Well, that's also, and of course, it's like, and the other idea was empowering citizens, being the citizens themselves from as well. And then for them up. I think there's a two approaches. One is to put down municipality governmental control, like having their and then there's
I had a conversation with your deputy mayor in Helsinki about this, Mr. Pentala, because he's got this new redevelopment project where the old oil port was. And he wants to use that as a living laboratory to try out some ideas. So it might be interesting for one of your companies that you invested in Pekkas, to talk to Pentala, the deputy mayor. He's been in that office for 10 years, I think, so he knows where all the skeletons are buried, as we say. You're right. This could be something big, and the city that does it first, I think it's going to be a breakthrough. Could be something that Nokia. Well, we can't talk about Nokia anymore, I guess. The old Nokia that we knew doesn't exist.
It's being reborn.
Well, they're merging with Alcatel, but I don't think that's Nokia that was the creative part. But that's a bias.
I know there's a lot of Nokia engineers that are supported new entrepreneurial activities.
Is that true, really?
Yeah.
As part of their transition?
Part of their transition.
Yeah. Mobile
I
platforms.
think you really interesting things in that. There's several sub-funds. Really exciting.
Steve.
My question is that, Cisco and IBM both involved in the Smarter City Challenge in the White House. So IBM is going to be hosting many city challenges around the world.
We have
IBM Foundation.
So what is Cisco's big plan for this? Tell us.
So, in addition to sponsoring and helping to organize Meeting of the Minds next week, and there'll be outcomes from that we can talk about, Cisco's got 4 things going on. The Internet of Things World Forum is convening December 6, 7, and 8 in Dubai, hosted by the Dubai government and by the UAE. And the idea is we got Intel as the lead sponsor with us, GE and Nextier, and other companies. I think there's about 20 companies that we've recruited to be our partners. It's called iotwf.com. You'll see. We're going to...
And the CIO from San Jose.
DJ was, you're right, absolutely. Thank you for knowing that. So we organized each year in parallel the smart transportation track, the smart energy track, the smart buildings track, the smart cities as kind of a framework. So we're going to have multiple presenters, the city of Hamburg, the city of Copenhagen. I think we have a heavy European bias on the program this year for whatever reason. So some of that will be webcast live. And the idea is that we're going to have about 1,500 invited guests. Any of you who'd like to be invited, we're happy to invite you. 1,500 invited guests from about 65 countries, 70 countries. And from that, well, building up to that was 20 working groups that really did solid work to try to get to the finish line. And that's now, the finish line is December 6th, 7th, and 8th, when they're going to unveil the results of their working group. So one was on privacy and security. There were a bunch of horizontal ones: privacy and security, embedded operating systems, global open standards, architecture. So a lot of horizontals, and then we had all these verticals: smart buildings, smart energy, smart transportation, smart manufacturing. So I would encourage you to look at the site as it kind of unveils. So there'll be several things that we do around that, not just the event itself. And then we're going to reconvene something called the Internet of Things Steering Committee, which meets once a year in San Jose. And the idea is we have about 175 companies that are listed on the website who are participating. Some of them are small, like BitStew, which is doing smart grid. Some of them are quite large, like Intel, who's the lead co-sponsor with Cisco of the program in December. And the idea is that we're going to, engage in assessing whether that exercise, this is the third time that it convenes, is valuable, or should we morph it into something else. So a grand challenge with real money behind it has been issued for IoT solutions, and so the winners will be announced on that stage like they were last year. So there are 4 or 5 things that we're doing with a heavy focus around Internet of Everything, because our premise is that if we focus only on Internet of Things, we're going to get fixated on the object and forget about the data that's streaming out of the object through the network, from the network, back and forth. We're going to forget about the process, the business process that changes because of the way the data is interpreted and analyzed and the meaning of the data. But we'll also ultimately forget about the people in the process. So we talk about things, data, process, people. And that's why we call it the Internet of Everything. We're not trying to be cute. We're trying to really reshape the conversation so it's not just about the bright, shiny object. Because frankly, people will buy an object only for so long. If it doesn't have value for them, their enthusiasm will go away very quickly.
I'm making one more note here because we do have an ISSIP BET craft book that's been co-authored by Cisco authors, and I think the title is those 4 things.
Oh, really? People, data, process,
yeah.
Oh, really? I can find it on the ISSIP site?
Yeah. I'll send it.
I didn't know about
those groups.
Yeah.
I looked I think 4 authors. Carlos, Signatory is one of them. And we would love to invite you to do. These are short books on any page. So if you got blog posts, all right.
Leon, did you have any response from our Cisco point of view? Am I missing any pieces of this?
I think, what's missing, and to me, was traffic management. I would say, that's an area where we made, I think, a very effective advertising the last traffic jam. But as far as making that a reality of what, what we're all in the side discussion, that's not there. And I think various cities are reaching out to using, technology sensors, lights, how to make sure that there's no traffic jam. Clear priority in terms of citizens for the city.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned London, but what are the other cities that you think are really amazing from a transportation perspective? Because
none of them stand out, which is the problem. I think that's why his point is so to the question. It's that a lot of talk in cities. New York City talks about Metropolitan Transportation Administration is going to implement new types of traffic lights that are able to sense the flow of traffic. Not a lot of it is working yet. It's all sort of projected, we demand the technologists build it, but the reality is that there's a gap between the demand side and the delivery of real working technologies that are scalable. Because it's one thing to do a pilot project. It's another thing to have it replicable, scalable, transferable, very hard to do.
Yeah, at Heathrow, I see these little, like, they're individual monorails up in the sky. And, you know,
the industry term is personalized rapid transit, PRT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those look really cool.
Yes.
And to certain places like parking lot.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, but why don't we have those?
Masdar tried it. Masdar tried it.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
It
it turned out to be a lot more complicated because basically what they wanted is, you know, the train would show up.
Yeah.
And you would get in your pod, and you'd indicate where you were going, and then it would
just take it.
And apparently, it's a bit like what happened at Denver Airport when they had to move luggage around. The whole system collapsed.
I thought to me it sounded like
it's a classic IBM
Cisco
programming
router.
problem.
To me, it sounded like a Cisco router with people as the bit.
The problem is we try to break the packets apart. You can't do that with people.
True.
And sometimes packets drop.
Drop packets.
Yeah, we don't want to drop any packets.
No packet loss is our motto.
I think, you know, I've seen, you know, London, Tokyo, and Hong Kong.
Hong Kong has tried, they really, because they built the real estate on top of every one of the rail stations, they were able to encourage transit-oriented development where people essentially could go down to the bottom floor and get to anywhere that they wanted. And that was kind of an accident of real estate development.
So one of the things that they have is the card, right? The octopus card, which is very similar to the British
British Oyster
card. And so I think that a lot of cities are starting to use that card for anything, like a debit card. So you can go to 7-Eleven and buy it. So I thought having one card and be able to do all those things is a significant convenience.
Well, in the 9 Bay Area counties, I think there are 27 different transportation agencies, each with their own payment system. So VTA, you know, and BART and MTA. And so if you can develop that, you might get the Nobel Prize. The common payment platform.
Common payment platform for a huge metropolitan area. I think that more is
Oh, yeah.
But I thought that was, for me, when I visited Hong Kong, I thought that was the most convenient. I could ride the subway and the tram, the electric tram, and then also go to 7-Eleven, buy newspaper, without ever showing my wallet. That's the story.
And if I stole your card, I could wipe out your bank account in 30 seconds, which is beautiful.
No, that was a fixed debit card.
So, energy. Where is the best city in the world for energy?
Copenhagen is way up there. So they made a commitment about 8 years ago to move to, you know, all green electrons. So they made big investments in the North Sea, and the Baltic wind, and Vestas, you know, which
they have big batteries. Like
they have a very large storage facility, but it's traditional batteries along with experimental lithium-ion.
Do you believe Elon's vision that these batteries will change everything?
I think distributed generation around solar is a pretty compelling proposition. And I mean, the question, of course, is the price point. Do I want to pay $3,000 now and fight with PG&E about, you know, selling electrons back into the system on an arbitrage basis? You know, I mean, you know, I don't know what their sales are like. They said at the very beginning when the announcement was made that they had sold out for their, you know, first 6 months of production. But, you know, in a cold climate in the Arctic, these issues, you know, are not theoretical.
No.
You know, people's survival depend upon batteries working. If battery is going to be the mode of home heating.
Right.
But you know, I don't think any city has really tried harder than Copenhagen. But last night, I think Hillary Clinton said, "This is not Denmark. This is the United States of America."
Thank you for the reminder. What about geothermal?
I think in the north, I think your city in Tampere, is it? a heavy geothermal? I think the Russians have thought about it in the volcanic east, but it's Russia, so that'll take a while.
Well, for private homes.
For geothermal in private homes, yeah. Well, because they need to feed the sauna.
Yeah.
In Espoo.
Really small, but yes, but it's actually more country, like,
yeah. I would bet that Reykjavik probably is at least 50% geothermal.
Yeah.
But, we had a company here, Calpine, with a facility, I think about 4 miles from here, off 237, and they went bankrupt. Now they've reorganized, and so they're operating the geothermal facilities again. They've got one at Mount Hamilton and several others, because we have some geothermal hotspots in the area. But, it never really took off the way that it could here. It may have been a regulatory problem.
The other question I have is, so I'm a big fan of the circular economy. I know you're how do you see 3D printing, robotics? Do you see manufacturing coming back local in our lifespan?
We have a project around 3D printing that started, and it's not just because we want to make our own stuff locally and not depend on the factory of the world in China.
Yeah.
Although that's certainly one ingredient, but we want to understand what are the data requirements and the connectivity requirements and the analytics that are going to be necessary to make a 21st century manufacturing economy vibrant, because a lot of our customers actually make real things like we do.
Yeah.
And so increasingly they're coming to us, the Procter & Gamble's of the world and the GE's of the world and the Siemens of the world, big and small stuff that's being made are coming to us saying, are we relevant to what they believe is happening in the 3D printing revolution? So I'm if I knew that there was a company other than 3D Systems which built the technology initially that could be invested, I'd start a little something for my grandson.
Yeah.
But right now, I don't think there's any company that's really capable of carrying this to the next level. And it may just be because there's just 1,000 players.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed is like the new Apple headquarters, watching that go up. And they did a really good job of recycling the concrete, and I think they even did some of the steel rebar and some other materials they recycled right there on the site.
And they mix their concrete sites to avoid having all those trucks come back. So you can see the mixer that's out there.
Yeah.
No big.
But I think even some of the steel rebar and stuff, I heard they were doing something.
Turning it into an iPhone 7 because of all those steel components.
No, but there was something there, and I think that's you see whole neighborhoods all at once. There's one section of Cupertino right now where they're taking down all the 30-year-old houses coming up. It seems there's
there are actually people who can still afford to live in Cupertino. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Those are all rentals.
Those are rentals, yes.
Yeah, actually, that's what a lot of people do. They rent out their house in Cupertino and then they go rent somewhere else where it's cheaper. Good.
Other cities that you're familiar in the Bay Area, which one would you consider the most forward?
Well, I think it's a fight between Palo Alto and San Francisco right now, because Palo Alto's hired some pretty amazing people on their team, like Bill Friend, who's their chief sustainability officer, and he's very good. So I would say that, the talent that the two cities have attracted, both very high quality talent. The projects that they have with locally based companies or not so locally based companies, because we're working with both of them, but we're not based in either one of them. Although we were born in Stanford, and we took our name from San Francisco, so we have some connection to both of them. or maybe was it San Francisco took that in from us? I forget. But anyway, the point is that both cities are really putting a lot of energy into chief sustainability officer positions, chief resiliency officer positions, chief innovation officer. There's a lot of new chief officers. The question is, will they take advantage of the resources that they have already available? So Palo Alto owns, their own fiber network, and they could be doing some interesting things with it. When Jim Birch was mayor, I was involved in that. Whether they'll do some amazing things with that, I don't know. They could. I mean, we could do some amazing things with them on the light poles, but not yet.
Well, Gordon, thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, really great.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you to the WebEx team.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, Jane.
Bye.
Hope to meet you sometime, Jane.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Get well. Get better, Jane.
See you next time.
Thank you.
So
Could we talk further about this, and Leon and I could be in touch with you about this?
I